Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. This is Brenda Perryman, and welcome to the no, not the Brenda Perryman Show. It's Table Talk with Brenda Perryman right here on TV 33, WHPR, Comcast 20 in Detroit. And are you ready? Are you ready? I know we're ready. I'm ready. And today we have a wonderful show for you today. I'd like to first introduce my co-hosts.
I'm Robert Thomas.
Chris Summerall.
And I'm Ken Coleman.
And today is a historic day in the city of Detroit. And today is a day where, well, they declared bankruptcy here in Detroit, but we're going to get to that in a minute because as our tradition goes, we start with Ken Coleman and today in Black History in Detroit.
Well, thank you, Brenda. On July the 18th, as most days are in our city's history, was very eventful. Brenda and gentlemen, on July 18th, 1968, the Temptations are playing the Westbury. Yes, that's right, Brenda. The Temps. They're playing. We've got to give her time to make sure she gives respect to the Temptations. To be sure. But Brenda, you may recall it was 1968. And the Temptations were playing.
Well, you said I recall. I was only 2 years old.
Only two.
But what could I recall? What could I recall?
The Temptations are playing the Westbury Music Festival in outstate New York. And they go on to the set, go onto the stage without a very important person, a very important David Ruffin. David Ruffin misses his second consecutive show on the road with the Temptations, which causes the management and the Motown team to replace David Ruffin. Do you recall the person who replaced David Ruffin?
Of course, that was Dennis Edwards. But you know, I got something close to that. Close to that because a few months prior to that, they performed at Eastern Michigan University, where I was a student, and all the Temptations got there, but David Ruffin. And so they were just, everybody was kind of milling around. I was on the committee. I joined the committee that brings them on just so I could be there and get a good seat.
She was a toddler at the time, by the way.
Yes, I was a very little girl. I was there with my mom. Anyway, to cut the story short, David Ruffin drives through the Fieldhouse door in a Corvette, and he had on a Beatles wig. Honest to God, he had on a Beatles wig. And I ran up to him. I said, David, you're late. They're waiting for you. And he said, little girl, go. No, he said, I'm not worried about him. And that was just like 2 months prior.
Yeah, wow. So it was on this day, July 18th, was David Ruffin, really David Ruffin at that point had been replaced with Dennis Edwards on this day in 1968. Also, in 1981, the first African-American city bus driver was recognized by Mayor Coleman Young. The first city's black bus driver was named George W. Jackson, and on this day in 1981, Coleman Young declared July 18th George W. Jackson Day in Detroit to honor the first black city bus driver.
Wow, amazing, amazing, amazing. Well, we have a lot to talk about, and I'll start first with the international news, and as has been for the past 3-4 weeks, our international news is Mandela. He turned 95 yesterday, and he is still alive. In fact, they say he's getting better. Isn't that amazing?
Great.
But, I mean, that's good to hear. I'm hoping that he is, and they're not just selling us a bill of goods, just trying to keep him alive and everything. But like you said, Ariel Sharon, is that who's still alive?
Yes, the Israeli, former Israeli Prime Minister. Yeah.
And now we're going to the Zimmerman Trial. What a week. What a week. Who's going to start with that? Is that Robert or?
Well, when we were here last week, we knew that the closing arguments were being communicated, and we knew that the jury would be able to begin to deliberate. And as history now has shown us, they did deliberate for a little bit more than a day and returned a not guilty verdict for Robert Zimmerman. I think all three of us thought it might be manslaughter.
Yeah. At minimum.
Reaction from the verdict.
I was pretty much appalled. And I was arguing with, I guess, the panel last week that he wouldn't receive second-degree murder. He was going to receive manslaughter. It was a lesser charge, and I thought that they were going to give him a sympathy, be a little bit more sympathetic to him and give him manslaughter, but they actually let him go, which is quite appalling for somebody to kill a young guy, a boy for that matter, and they tried to frame it as if he's a grown man, and I don't think they personalized, the prosecution really personalized subject matter pretty
Right.
well.
Well, I don't think the prosecution made Mr. Martin, Trayvon, I don't think they made him a human being.
Yeah.
I think that they should not have allowed the defense to bring up a neighbor who had been robbed by a black teenager. There's so many things that I think the prosecution did wrong, and I don't think that they were totally invested, or even, maybe they just didn't have the skills, but I thought they did not come correct. They didn't draw a scenario of what could have happened. That's the thing. They didn't even say, well, this is probably what happened,
Yeah.
and everything, wherein the defense did. And it just, to me, it was such a racist defense.
Yes.
Also, there were reactions and protests. By the way, Chris, what did you think?
Well, I was totally caught off guard. I really felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. For it's one of those moments where you'll always remember where you were when you heard
And where
that.
were you?
I was actually checking my Facebook, and I didn't hear the verdict, but I saw everybody's posts, and I saw just the immediate outbreak of anger and astonishment, and I didn't want to believe it. I did not want to believe it, but I recognized quickly that the judicial system had put another one, unfortunately, on a member of the African American community, and immediately my response was that I didn't want to read any of the posts because I didn't want to get angry. I didn't want to have my energy just tied up in just banter back and forth, and so I stepped back for a little bit, and then I started making some comments and
Well, it's funny how nobody, the white community didn't seem to understand that black people have to give their sons a narrative. There's a narrative that we
Right.
have. If you stop, then you do this, or you don't do this. And here comes a man up behind Trayvon Martin who had no uniform on. He's following the young man and everything. It's no use me going through it, but everybody knows what happens. And last night I happened to wake up and during the night turn on CNN, and there was a reverend on CNN talking about Trayvon Martin. He was just mad that people are saying exactly what we are. They said George Zimmerman. He seemed to have sympathy for George Zimmerman. But there have been many protests. Many of them have been peaceful. And there have been protests in the city of Detroit. I think there's a vigil or a big protest later that the Trayvon Martin family is going to. Maybe it's tomorrow. I'm not sure.
It's Saturday.
It's Saturday? Okay.
And there's
now,
been one. Oh, there was
Yeah.
one already the following day
Yeah.
in Grand Circus Park.
Yeah.
If I could just point out really quickly, I mean, certainly, as everyone on the panel, my sentiments are exactly where each of you are. I tend to look at these things and therefore, what do we do now?
Right.
And a couple of thoughts come to mind. Number one, we've already seen that the Department of Justice, the Clinton Justice Administration, is taking a look at the case itself to see whether or not there is an opportunity to weigh in on the federal side. And so we'll have to wait to see what happens there. But I'm saying what I've really always said and encouraging particularly African Americans and African American men to be part of jury pools. I mean, the reality is Sanford, Florida is 30% black, at least by its census data, which suggests to me that there should have been an African American on the jury. Now, I know that prosecution and defense sides weigh jury selection. There's a whole process that goes on, and I'm sure that the defense probably did not want an African American on the jury. But there's still, it seems to me, Robert, to be sure, there's still more work for us to do in our community, particularly getting young African American men, whatever it takes, to be involved in the jury process, both at the federal and state level.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And looking around at this case, I also think that Trayvon Martin was on trial and not George Zimmerman. I think that's that looks like it was the total outcome of the case. I was looking at the past week, juror B37 and some of her remarks.
Yes, yes.
You know, I think what she made a statement saying I think both of them should have just walked away, and the evidence showed that, you know, Trayvon Martin ran away. He tried to run away from this guy.
What was she thinking? What was she been doing the last?
Where was this kid?
Well, I think that her mind was made up before the trial even started, because in fact people have alluded to the fact that they think that she might have told some lies on the stand about what she knew, because she was the one who said that when George Zimmerman did not get indicted at first, there was a riot. There was no riot. If you want to call us, you could call us at 313-868-0342, 868-0351.
I want to add that she didn't say George Zimmerman. She called him George and Georgie. Personalized the guy.
That told you a lot, didn't it?
Crazy.
I think that as far as my perspective, obviously when there's a situation that's like this, it gives us an opportunity to reflect, and something adjacent to the trial and everything, there needs to be a reflection or a dialogue about the many Trayvons that have, you know, constantly been victims of black on black. And so
well, you know, isn't it funny about that black on black crime? They said there is no black on black crime. They said because white people kill white people just like blacks kill blacks. But I know exactly what you're saying.
And the fervor and the energy, because it amazes me how galvanized the community can get behind something in an instant. But our children in our neighborhoods, our own neighborhoods, children that we know personally, can fall victim to, you know, brutal, unnecessary violence, and will just continue on and really won't hold these perpetrators accountable to the same extent. So
I don't know that. I don't know about that. I think when we get to court, we still want the guilty party, who we perceive as being a guilty party, we want those guys prosecuted to the fullest extent, especially if they're caught and they're in court.
Well,
we still want those guys to
so
serve the time that they deserve.
And there's a segment in the black community that has a certain phrase, don't snitch. Don't snitch. That's real. And so we almost, by promoting that type of mentality, we're almost saying, do not allow that person to have the truth come out in court, or, you know. And so we need to erase that and build on whatever energy to not allow Trayvon Martin to just be another sad statistic, but actually, okay, how can we bring this back home to our neighborhood and build on what our problems are in our own community day in and day out?
I don't necessarily disagree, Chris, if you're saying we need to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time.
Absolutely.
I think you're absolutely right about that. And that's my point about jury selection. I mean, you know, we ought to be making sure that we are filling out jury questionnaires that we're serving. Now, I understand that some people are running away from some responsibilities at times, and that's why they may not get involved in the system. I understand that sometimes your employment situation may be have a negative effect on you being able to serve, but it's very important. If we can, and rightly so, get excited and upset and outraged about Trayvon Martin, we ought to get excited and upset about Pookie down the street, and about Jamil down the street too. Walk and chew gum at the same time.
Absolutely.
Well, I think, personally, I think that we need to go against what is believed about us. People count on us not loving one another. They count on us killing each other. We need to start doing better ourselves in our community, show people that we have a united front, that we don't just react. We're proactive, and we continue to care about each other, care about our community, and we want things to go well. Robert?
It's funny you mention that, because I recall when Rachel Gentile was on the stands, and how she was being persecuted by, you know,
black folks,
African Americans, whites, everybody. It was crazy.
Everything from her hair wasn't right, or what her demeanor was.
You know, she's a key witness, and everybody was, you know, taking turns of just tearing her down. So you're absolutely right. We need to come together as a community and start, you know, uplifting one another. And I'm happy, you know, at least Tom Joyner went ahead and gave her a full ride to FAMU
That's great.
while she's seeking her criminal justice degree. So I hope she takes advantage of that opportunity.
Well, you know, and speaking of Rachel, I don't think she was prepared well, as she should have been. They should have gone over things over and over and over again, told her what she would encounter when she got up there, because Don West got up there, and she was calling him Don. That's amazing to me. She said, and Don just kept on. And she was...
And she was reluctant, right? I mean,
Yes,
the whole
she
time
was
she was
reluctant.
that showed.
I would be careful with that because she's
Okay.
a 19-year-old kid.
Okay.
And it's, you know, she could have been prepared. We don't know, but you know, you got to deal with an adolescent mind, how, you know, and especially you on the stance.
Oh, yeah. On the
It's a
national-
whole
international
other
stage.
world. We're not having everyday conversations. This is something, this outcome is going to be,
Yeah.
you know, it could be devastating, just like the outcome was, the verdict that was read last week. But I don't know. You could prepare all you want, but once you understand, it's just a different world you're facing at that time.
Did you hear about the jury perks?
Oh, yes, I
The
saw that.
jury, while they were sequestered those days, they spent $33,000 on the jury. They got to have steaks and pedicures. They went to the show 2 times. They got to see their families and everything, and their families had to take a vow not to talk about the case. Yeah, right. I think that juror who, Anderson Cooper,
37.
Yeah.
B37.
B37.
Her husband was.
Her husband was an
attorney.
attorney, and I just think that she kind of was like the ringleader. And how dare her think that she could write a book? The book company dropped her, but she was going to write a book about what went on, what
To
went
profit.
on. Yes, Rob?
I would say that the book company only dropped her out of protest from
Right.
the public.
After there was a...
After she came on
agree.
national television.
Totally,
But
totally.
she sat up there and said, hey, it was 3-3. And they had to convince the other 3 that he was not guilty.
Well, what are the group dynamics in jury cases once they go to deliberation, Robert? Do you see, is it like the lunchroom where you see somebody arise as a sort of leader in the room that tries to encourage the others to go along with him or her, or is everybody sort of their equal, or is everything different? Every jury
I
different.
haven't seen deliberations, but I can only imagine someone will, you know, let's say an alpha male. The person is going to be, you know, the leader out of the group and going to try to raise their voice higher than the next person. But yeah, well, I mean, that's what they do typically. They have to convince one another one way because it has to be one verdict. So
What do you, I wanted to have you guys chime in. What do you think about Stevie Wonder coming out and openly saying that until the Stand Your Ground is off the books, he won't perform
In any state that has Stand Your
in
Ground.
any state?
I applaud Stevie. I mean, here's a brother, quite frankly, that has been a major superstar entertainer over various periods of his career. He's always been a star, but he's been a megastar at times. And even when he's been a megastar, has taken principal positions on issues in which he believes in. And so, I mean, I applaud him. I mean, I think that now Stevie can do that. You know, it'll be interesting to see will other entertainers follow suit, but I applaud it. I applaud him following his conviction, number one, and as an African-American man who's outraged at this verdict, I applaud him as a brother.
well, what's interesting, I mean, he did that over this past week, but you know, you still had the NAACP just had their national convention there. And whatever
They were booked already,
organizations,
obviously.
other organizations out there that are already committed and locked in those dates in Florida, it's going to be kind of hard to break that contract without taking some serious repercussions for doing it. And I don't see it happening. But you had a lot of folks, especially, you know, you follow Facebook and Twitter saying they're not going to visit Florida and, you know, circulate their dollars in that area at all until these Stand Their Ground laws are revamped.
Well, Cincinnati, Ohio is in Orlando, Florida, to be sure, particularly as it relates to a destination spot. But we can all remember 10 or 12 years ago when there were police brutality cases in Cincinnati, and a lot of the African-American community began to disinvest from Cincinnati. You know, the famous jazz festival that was there for many years really sort of ramped itself down, came back after that. But there are some examples in recent history where our community has galvanized around an issue, albeit all tragic, and then fight for a different result.
Don't you think that hitting them in the pocketbook is one of the strongest ways to protest? I'm not into marching. I think I mentioned it before. Not even if I could march like that, I'm just not into it, because a young person, and he lives in New York, he was in the march that they held in New York on Sunday. And when they held that the one in New York on Sunday, he talked about all different kinds of people were there. I said, well, I don't march. I said, back in the day, I did march. That was kind of a shock for people. The world didn't know how to take the marching and everything. Now they say, oh, here they go marching again. I just have issues with it, when I think that we could hit them in the voting booth, and we could hit them with the economic piece. Don't you think the economic piece is very strong? That's what you were just saying, Ken.
I think they're both, but here's another example of walking and chewing gum at the same time. I mean, I have a political orientation. I mean, I take voting very seriously. I take being involved in the political process very seriously. And so I think that is a very powerful tool, and history has taught us over the years that it has been a very strong tool. But the economic piece, boycott, selective buying, however you like to phrase it, is very important too, Brenda. I think in 2013 we need to be able to do both.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now we're gonna, Robert, one more thing.
And I would just to echo Ken's point, I think you can do both, even much so that there will be a Justice for Trayvon Martin rally tomorrow at noon at the Department of Justice headquarters downtown. Federal building.
And I hope they tell us to start spending money and vote. I mean, something has to work, because people go to rallies and then they forget. We're going to go on to some local stories, because time can get away, and it gets away from us so often. As I say, if you want to give us a call, 313-868-0342. Now, locally, as I mentioned, the city has filed for Chapter 9 bankruptcy. Ken, did you want to start off?
Obviously, yesterday will go down in the history books, in the history of Detroit, the history of our country, as one of the most impactful days in the city's history. Now, some people call it the most tragic day in the city's history. Other people believe it's an opportunity for the city to retrofit itself and become new again. To be sure, it obviously was a newsmaker, and so what happened, of course, yesterday is the city's emergency manager, Kevin Orr, after advice and counsel from Governor Rick Snyder, filed bankruptcy, or at least filed the paperwork for the city of Detroit to become the largest city in the nation's history to file Chapter 9. One of the things that I've said in the hours since that has happened is, I believe, quite frankly, that everybody in this region should be held responsible for the city's economic demise. That is all former mayors, particularly after Albert Cobo, all common and city councils, all bargaining units, whether they be AFSCME or the DPOA or the firefighters. We all bear a responsibility in the city's economic demise, and I'm not so sure that one has more weight over the other, but I think the blame game, quite frankly, isn't helpful at this point. And so when unions say it's the mayor's fault, and when the mayor says, well, only if the unions had given up more, I think, first of all, it's not really instructive at this point, because now we've got to kind of figure out how to get out of this. But then secondly, it takes two to tango, and the deals that have been cut over years, over negotiations, the freeways that have been built to drive people out to the burbs, the laws that have been enacted to keep cities like Detroit from having employment residency law requirements, all of those things played hand in hand in the city's demise.
Right. Well, with this, what do we see? Because the governor and Governor Snyder and Orr, they were on television today. Did anyone see this?
Did, yep. Sobering press conference, but not anything really more than what we got a glimpse of yesterday. More of a question, and stating on the record, confirming this is what we did, and answering questions from reporters, about various elements of the timing, is what we saw mainly today.
I mean, personally, I think this is going to be more of a structured type of bankruptcy. I mean, he was trying his best. I'm not a supporter of emergency manager but I think he was seriously trying his best to get all the creditors on one board, and they didn't buck. He asked them to come to Detroit, take them around. They said no. And then you had two players that came in. He made a deal with them. He first offered everybody 10 cents on a dollar. He settled with Bank of America and AG with 75 cents on a dollar. But no one else would play ball. So, I mean, he had to show these guys that he was serious. And now we're in the situation we're in. We have, after, what, 30, we have a 30 to 90-day period before it goes to court.
Yeah.
And once it goes to court, it's up to the judge, the federal bankruptcy judge, to dictate the final outcome of what's going to actually happen with the city's assets.
So, you know, I agree with Ken, and I'm interested to see whether over the next several weeks, it will just be more of the same blame game. Well, you know, you should have, if only, or if there's going to be some honest looking at real numbers to solve real problems. And so, you know, it affects me directly, being that I have been a firefighter in the city for over 11 years. Mm-hmm. And so I'm interested to see, okay, things haven't went anyone's way at this point. And so what's gonna happen? We can't control the filing of the initial paperwork for bankruptcy. But now, okay, let's get to the core issues, because this blame game has been going on for decades. Yep. For decades.
But people have to accept the blame. It's been going on, but people have to accept the blame. Sometimes when you do something, you say, okay, I did it, it's my fault, now where do I go from here?
But that's not necessarily a function that's going to actually needs to happen.
What?
What I'm saying is, if there's a spill in the floor and no one fesses up to it, at some point in time you have to say, well, we just got to clean it up, instead of just, okay, well, who did it? Yeah. Well, it's still on the floor. It's got to get fixed.
But I think who did it is very important.
It's important, but at the same point, we can continue to waste more and more critical time and have citizens of the city of Detroit go without crucial services that they need, or we can all just say, guess what? This is a collective problem, like Ken mentioned. Yeah. We all played a part in it, and so let's all try to play a part in fixing it.
As Robert's pointed out.
We have a caller on the line. I'm sorry. Good afternoon, caller.
Good afternoon. This is Orthea Barnes. How are you?
Hi, Orthea. How are you?
I'm very good. I got a question to ask. I don't know if anybody can answer it. How can they take pension money when they've already put that money in? They have a pension.
Well, the answer to the question, good to hear from you, Orthea. The answer to the question really has a couple different parts, right? Chris, obviously, as you know, the state law really holds the pension dollars themselves sacrosanct, meaning right now, pre-bankruptcy, if we were to go there, state law prohibits the city from taking from Chris's pension. The health care, for example, on the other end is not secured, meaning that even if we let's say we do go to the bankruptcy route. Now there's some argument about whether or not federal law supersedes state law on this issue of your pension too, but we know for sure that the health care is not part of what's protected. And so I think what the unions, and Chris can certainly make this point better than I can, I think what the unions are arguing is, you know, we're going to do everything that we can to keep you from not only touching our pension, but certainly taking our health care, and we're not willing to trade that off for a bankruptcy or anything else.
Absolutely. And we feel that this is a direct attack on the pension system that has been eyed for quite some time now. And so this is an opportunity when there's chaos to come in and take something that you've wanted for quite some time. And so 344, the DPOA, they are going to position themselves to fight for those legal rights in the state of Michigan. And we'll see at this point in time, who knows how things will go, but we know what the law states now.
Yeah, it's pretty much an unprecedented case.
Yep, that's the
and with those unsecured bonds, what they're trying to claim that the pension health care system is unsecured. So the federal judge, if she deems, well, he or she deems it necessary, she can rule on it, and they can take whatever they're actually going to give from that one judge. That's if it goes into the full envelope of the bankruptcy. But they're trying to settle up until then. I personally think a lot of the creditors will probably end up settling, but this is going to be a pretty contentious issue when you're talking about the pension board taking that type of loss.
Yeah, I remember being a member of the Charter Revision Commission and people whispering in our ear, business-oriented folk whispering in our ear, why don't you look at this section of the charter? Why don't you change the function and the makeup of the pension boards, the general retirement and the public safety, the police and fire, for this very reason. And so this has been a contentious issue for particularly Republicans in Lansing for many, many years now. And now, on the eve of a bankruptcy, I think those forces see the opportunity to really change the way the pension process works in the city of Detroit, and obviously have a serious effect on the employees at work.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because in that federal suit, if it goes to the federal bankruptcy, one of the things that I'm pretty sure emergency manager Orr is going to ask for is to change some of that charter language too.
There was a talk about that today, or a reference to it.
But that's part of that lawsuit.
He could do that?
He can pretty much do whatever he wants to do. In a very general sense.
Let's first check. Dorothea, are you still there? Oh.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Did that answer some of your questions?
Yeah, it did. Yes, it did. Thank you so much.
Okay,
good to hear from you.
Thank you.
Good to hear
Love
from you.
you. I got your answer too.
And
All right. Love you too.
Okay.
I want to add that, just on your point, Ken, I think when you're talking about the city galvanizing and trying to correct some of these wrongs that have been going on for decades, if it goes to bankruptcy, this just don't affect Detroit, and it affects every local county in this area with their interest rates spiking up, and no one wants that. Yeah. So it's going to, that's even more reason for the governor to push, and the emergency manager or to push everybody to come together and galvanize around Detroit. And, I've seen, messages on social media talking about leaving Detroit because of this and stuff like that. If you leave, you can leave if you want to. That's what I say. But there's going to be people coming in, and they may not look like us either. That's coming.
250,000 people have left in the last 13 years. I mean, 1 million people have left in the last 60. And so the city is going to continually see a loss in income. And that's one of the things. I mean, we've talked about this before, and I'm certainly not trying to assess blame. I think we need to move forward. But there have been actions carried out by many players, many actors, but certainly some bargaining units to help hasten the city's or speed up the city's financial situation. And when the firefighters and the DPOA went to Lansing for many, many years arguing for banning a local residency employment requirement, that is one of the things that was very, very detrimental to the city's fiscal health. And that was a bargaining unit that right now is arguing that because of state law, the state constitution, that they have an opportunity to keep their pensions intact. I saw a news report last night, a local news report. The reporter goes all the way out to Milford, bypassing tens and thousands of retirees in the city of Detroit, goes all the way to Milford to talk to a couple of retired police, man and wife, retired police officers who were raising horses on a farm in Milford, and they were talking about their pensions being lost. They might have been very well part of the class that went to Lansing 15 years ago to argue for a state law now that has been had one of the biggest detrimental impacts on the city's fiscal health, and that's losing residency. That's why, in a large sense, 250,000 people left Detroit, and the last police chief went on record saying that half of his sworn officers don't even live in the city.
Yeah. And so, being a firefighter, I can agree and assure you that we've had some serious debates in firehouses about that.
I hope so.
About that. but we recognize that that's just a link in the chain. If you add up those projected half of the police department, and if you give in half of the fire department, of that 250,000, that's a very, very small percentage. And so what we're looking at a series of problems that have been linked together and never really been addressed. And so at this point in time, you know, again, who spilt it? Is that the issue, or as much as well? Is it the issue as much as let's get it cleaned up? And I think that our region specifically, I've lived.
Walk and chew gum at the same time, brother. Walk and chew gum at the same time.
I think that our region, southeastern Michigan, has constantly had this finger pointing versus progressive, let's get this done. It's always about
I agree with you, Chris, but I'm
black,
just saying,
white, Detroit, burbs,
I agree
Union
with you.
City.
I agree with you, but my issue is if somebody doesn't take the blame, it can't happen again with the same people that did it in the first place.
Well, I will say I want to ask, I'll ask our viewers and the panel this. If someone stepped up today and said, it's my fault, how would that improve the financial outlook? Because this is a financial situation we're in. This is a financial crisis that the city and the region really is in.
And legal
so,
at this point.
And legal, it's not going to add $1 to the budget.
Okay, I just want to speak on one thing quickly that Ken brought up. He was talking about the people who have left the city of Detroit. There are people coming into the city of Detroit also. But the issue, and this is a very important issue, are the public schools. If the public schools don't get any better, it will not increase the amount of people coming into this city. And it bothers me when I hear candidates saying, even connecting themselves with the school. They do that, and people get sucked in by that. But anyway, what do you think about that?
I think most of the people that are coming in are young, they're living in Midtown, downtown, and they're renters. It's not that many people coming in here purchasing property. Now, I won't say there's not at all, but it's not as many as the growth in Midtown and downtown.
Yeah, data, on Robert's point, data clearly show that the people who are coming back are in two categories for the most part. They're young 20-somethings who don't have children yet, or they're empty nesters, people who have raised their children, want to get out of a house. They may want to move downtown. They're closer to the theater. They're closer to the ball games. They're closer to the water. I do know of some people, some young families that are making the move to come back to the city. But it's been my anecdotal experience, and some of the data that I've seen show that that's not the biggest group. It's the 20-somethings and maybe folks that are 50, 60, 70 that are retired. I agree with you, Chris, that it's less important right now who the bad actors were or where the blame lied. But in order, in this window that Robert talked about, this window, the time between the electronic filing for bankruptcy and the actual judge being assigned to a case, there is a window here for an opportunity to come to some level of agreement. And I don't think, just like the kid who spilled the milk, if you don't admit that you did something wrong and seek to correct it, there's no way to correct it. So I'm not asking for a tribunal and a mea culpa and a press conference where people say, my bad, we messed up here, and somebody said, I messed up there. Get it fixed. And the biggest problem right now is the pension debt. We can argue about the amount of it. I've even talked to union people that agree that it's bigger than, look, the pension debt is far bigger than who controls Belle Isle and what grass gets cut at what park and how many cops get on the street. That's where the real debt is, legacy debt, just like the legacy debt in the automobile industry. And I give the UAW credit for really getting onto this years ago and realizing that if they wanted to still be a player, they were going to have to change with the times, and they worked with management. Wasn't easy. Everything ain't perfect. Union people will tell you all day long that they still have some problems with it, but they came to the table. I just see this as an opportunity for bargaining units to do more than what they have, and for executives and lawmakers to meet them halfway. I think all of y'all are to blame. All of y'all are to blame, I don't think one's more important than the other, but it takes two to tango.
I think it's all of us as Detroit is to blame. I won't say all of y'all, because it's been elected officials, the unions, everybody is to blame.
Yeah.
And,
who they
and
elect.
you cannot argue against owing 40 cents on the dollar. I'm sorry. It only leaves you with too much, so much.
Okay, guys, we have to move on. I know we could talk about this
Can
till
I
next
say
Friday.
one more point on it? Just one more.
All
One more.
right.
This is even more of a reason to start asking these mayoral candidates tougher questions.
Thank you.
It's just, I mean, about regionalization of transportation and about repopulating this area.
I thank you, because I really think there's a lot of preaching to the converted. There's a lot of saying what people want to hear. I believe that, but as soon as this primary is over, we're going to get these candidates on here and we're going to start cooking with gas. Also, Karen Dumas had a column this week I thought was very interesting. She said that the emergency manager should have hired somebody who was not from here. Should have gotten somebody who had no skin in the game, had not received anything, and she was talking about, not that she had anything really against Gary Brown, but that $225,000, that $225,000, that was a heck of a lot of money, everybody. So, and that there are pockets of hope, with, everybody's putting so much in Dan Gilbert. Remember, with Dan Gilbert's companies, you have to have an education. So if there's any training that you can do, I would advise people to go out and do it. A lot of people are saying, well, I can't get a job, I can't get a job. Then I get calls from people who say, I need somebody to do this. But a lot of people have some pride, like they can't work certain jobs. What do you all think?
Well, on the issue of Dumas's column, I think to the point about Gary Brown, she's spot on. I mean, I've written publicly on my Facebook page that I think the Gary Brown moving from city council to the emergency manager's job was a political payoff. I think it's very clear that he was the guy at the council table that carried the governor's water. And this is a political payoff of sorts for Gary to go into a job where he triples his salary. And quite frankly, I agree with Gary Brown on some issues, particularly around fiscal integrity and fiscal constraint when he was on city council. So I don't say this with any particular glee, but I think it was I had two problems with Gary. One, he quit before his term was over. He swore that he would give 4 years as a member of city council, and just because things weren't going your way, you quit. That's no real way to handle it, number one. And then number two, I think he's neither qualified for the job, nor was it a job given to him on anything other than being a political payoff.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of questions on that. Quickly, Chris, quickly.
And it was really just a slap in the face and distasteful as well. A bad, poor judgment. It had the stench of politics.
Stench.
It was more of the same, recycling of the same old faces, the same old names. And so it really did not breathe that fresh air that Mr. Orr was actually chosen from a different region to come in and infuse. He was supposedly chosen because he had no alliance either way. But one of the first key moves that you make is status quo. The same old Detroit, almost even more blatant.
Wow. You're right. Well, this week the judge dismissed the suit by Tom Barrow to remove Mike Duggan as a write-in candidate.
Yes, we discussed this last week where he filed the suit, and this Monday, the very same judge who told the mayoral candidate Duggan that he was kicked off, told him that he was back on, which was definitely did a little virtual smackdown on Barrow. But so he's back on as a write-in candidate, that is, not back on the ballot. Right. But he's definitely a write-on candidate, and he can advertise that way.
Well, do you think his advertisements are good? Do you think that people will follow what's happening? How do you think that's going to play out?
What's interesting is I don't believe it's his money he's spending on the advertisements. I think it's a PAC that's actually spending the money on the advertisements. And it's more of an educational how to write his name on and what boxes to check.
Fill in the circle.
Yeah, after you skip everyone else's. So it's more of an educational type of way to number one, spell his name, because if you spell it wrong, it doesn't count, or it's going to be extremely challenged, and he's probably going to lose.
Well, you know, and that's a bone of contention, but it's pretty clear it has to be intent. And so, you know, and I imagine that all the other mayoral challengers will have people in the room when the ballots are counted and will probably challenge every signature that it's spelled to the T incorrectly. But my understanding about state law, it speaks more to intent than the actual a verbatim spelling, or, you know, any question about a twist on a
Well, you all have your ear to the ground. What do you think? What do you think? How do you
Every
think
misspelling could be challenged.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
well, I mean, just remember Bush v. Gore, and those were Chads. I mean, you know, that wasn't even a signature. That was, you know, whether or not there was you know, an indentation or a perforation in an oval. I think that well-oiled campaigns like the Napoleon campaign will have people counting every signature and challenging all of it. To be sure, and there'll probably be an independent party that'll do the same. To Mike Duggan's radio and TV spots, I think they're pretty much well written. I would have probably spelled out Mike Duggan's name, you know, literally. But I think the job of the ad is to create excitement about the candidate, tell about the candidate's record, and be instructive to the prospective voter about what to do in the box. And I think on those ads, all three are done.
Well, he's everywhere. I went to a house party Sunday, and he was there at a house party.
Yeah.
I said, golly, you're everywhere.
He's the DJ.
Yeah.
He was the DJ. He served the drinks. No, I'm just
He
kidding.
has
On
to.
the ones and twos.
He seriously has to. He's a write-in candidate.
Yeah.
He has to get his name out there to people. You know, you have people that don't think he's a candidate at all. He has to get his name out there, especially in Detroit. He has some things working against him. So, yeah.
Okay, we're going to go through a few more quick issues because we just have 10 minutes left. The M1 Railway.
The M1 Railway will be underway later this summer, early this fall, starting from downtown. I think it's going to come into Midtown area next year around this time. But it's underway. It's funded, and it's pretty much ready to go.
It's just going to go past the boulevard or to the boulevard?
It's going to go to the boulevard and have, you know, a station, the last station there. But of course, it's going to be plans later on for it to branch out into, you know, maybe that Myers area, maybe a little further, once this area seriously think about regionalization.
Shoot, I'll be too old to ride it by the time it comes. I'm worried about that. Now, Dan Gilbert, he threw his hat in the ring to buy the Wayne County Jail that was supposed to cost $120 million, that's now said to be costing $390 million.
Yeah.
Now, there are 4 other people besides Dan Gilbert in the ring who want to buy that site. What do you think?
Well, I read an article in Crane's Detroit, and it really echoed Dan Gilbert's sentiments with regard to, just from a logistical standpoint alone, with the synergy that's going on in the entertainment district, the Greektown area, that was just a bonehead place to put a jail.
Wonder whose idea that was.
I'm not sure, but I definitely wouldn't let him pick my outfit in the morning. So the numbers, of course, they're all over the place. The numbers are all over the place. But from a fan of downtown and wanting to see just continued development and entertainment and retail, it really irks me when I see a big prison going up next to, you know, everything down there. So
Absolutely. I don't disagree. I think it's there. It's there because it's always been there. And in the historical context, you know, when you went into town, everything was in town. You know, the shop, the lockup, and everything. And so 1300 Bobby and Police Headquarters ends up being in the Central Business District in downtown. And so by extension, the county jail gets built there too. But that's the old paradigm. And I totally agree with you, Chris, that there needs to be a new one. I'm quite frankly happy that 2 things. One, the county has recognized that this has been a boondoggle to be sure, and looks to be trying to get out of the business of trying to work this deal. And then number 2, that there are people like Dan Gilbert who are ready to step up. Dan sees this opportunity as building an entertainment empire that he's creating. And if, you know, if he's got Greektown Casino and he's got a business interest with Quicken and Rock Solutions and all those places, he's got a vested interest in making sure that it's an
Rock
entertainment
Ventures.
place. Rock Ventures, excuse me. Sorry.
Oh, it may be a solution for some.
Well, he's creating solutions, that's for sure. He owns half the stuff.
We got to go on. We got to move on. We have as you see, people, we can talk and talk and talk, but Myers is coming to Detroit, and so next week, this time next week, Friday, Myers is here in the old state fairgrounds, and as I told the guys today, when I'm in Myers, I'm going to be in a certain spot and say, yeah, I used to be on the roller coaster right here.
Yeah.
Chris.
Yeah, exciting news. Myers is here in Detroit. And so next week, Myers is set to open. Not only Myers, but there are a host of other retail, Marshalls, K&G Superstore. So if you like this suit that my buddy's Rob got on, you'll find some not quite as nice. He gets his made. But Dots, Wingstop, Five Below. So there's just a host. Petco, Payless, Subway.
And the gas station.
The gas station. And so fans of the city, like myself, we have been begging and begging for retail in the city. Now we have a glimpse, because this is historic. This is the largest commercial development in the city's history, about 36 acres, over 350,000 square feet. So we've kind of got what we asked for.
Oh, the merry-go-round used to be in Dots.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a great thing. I know a lot of people will be there, so I won't go there for another year when the crowd dies down. Now, to a social issue that I found, well, I don't know if it's a social issue, but I think so, because some people are talking about taking Jay-Z to task about calling Harry Belafonte a boy in his new song. He hit him because he took Jay-Z and Beyonce to task a couple of years ago and said that they're not doing enough for the community. And I wonder how you all felt about that really quick.
Well, look, I'm a fan of both gentlemen, both Jay-Z and Harry Belafonte. And to be honest with you, I do kind of cringe when I see, younger people, dress down an elder the way that Jay-Z's done in a public way. But there are two sides of the story. As you pointed out, Belafonte was critical of Jay-Z and Beyonce a couple of years ago. I think both sides need to sit down and chill, maybe go to a rap show, have some Cristal or something, and just
Jay-Z doesn't mess with him.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I'm old. I'm old school. I'm old school.
I think it's an extreme form of disrespect. I don't think Harry Belafonte called him a thug or called him out his name or anything like that. I don't think he deserved that type of comeback.
Well, if it wasn't for Harry Belafonte,
yeah, a lot of us wouldn't be in the positions.
well, Jay-Z wouldn't be able to come out and do a lot of the things that he did, because Harry Belafonte sacrificed what could have been his career to get out there and march and to speak against racism. And Jay-Z,
Harry Belafonte, Sidney Poitier.
yes.
Can't argue with it. I mean,
Yes, they did. And see, Jay-Z, I know some people think he's deep. I think he's intellectually and all of this, he hit his glass ceiling several years ago. I have Magna Carta. I don't see anything tremendous about that, and so forth. So I just think that he was grossly disrespectful and everything. And I mean, they're talking about the fact that Beyonce gave $100,000 donation a few years ago. Come on, really? How much money do they have? And when they chose to go somewhere, they went to Cuba. And I know people are suffering there, but really.
It's my lineage. Well, I take it that if I got into your vehicle, you're probably bumping Nas this morning over Jay-Z. But yeah, I find that in this, when you look at hip-hop and the history of rap, it's confrontational. And I think that in this case, it not only stepped into disrespectful, but almost stupid. Because Jay-Z, he's at a point in his career stature that he has tremendous influence over the African American community and our culture as a whole. I can remember everybody had jerseys on, Jay-Z said, I'm going to put button up on, and the next week, everybody had a button up on. So this guy has tremendous influence, and there's a vast majority of individuals who listen to Jay-Z who don't know Mr. Belafonte, the sacrifices he's made, and so for him to introduce him to that generation that way was just uncalled for, distasteful, and you know, he definitely didn't earn any points that he barely had.
Well, along with fame comes responsibility.
Good stuff.
That's all I could say.
Yeah,
Good stuff.
yeah.
And I think that Jay-Z, really, he has enough money. It just got me, like, what's the player's name on Miami Heat? Oh, God.
LeBron?
Dwayne
Wade.
They were lauding him because he gave $25,000 back to his old neighborhood. $25,000? And you have millions and millions of dollars? I think this is crap.
So are y'all saying that this is not the new diss thing? We don't expect Belafonte to come out with a diss record? No. This is not Nas and Jay-Z?
We have a caller. We got to
just had
go
an
right
opportunity.
quick. Good afternoon, caller.
Yeah, hi, Brenda. How are you?
Real quick.
Okay, real quick. In terms of the young man that said that Jay-Z has a lot of control over the black community, I think what he should have said was he has some control over the community that's of his age. Now, I'm 66, and I could care less about Jay-Z myself. But, I mean,
Yeah, but then
I don't understand what he's singing.
A segment. I think he was speaking about a segment of the young black population.
Yeah, but he should have said it like that.
Well, well,
Okay.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to browbeat anybody. I just wanted him
No.
to be politically correct.
Not you, Tom. Not you.
I know, Tom.
I definitely appreciate that, and I recognize that, and maybe I misworded it.
Yeah,
And so
probably.
clearly, there's a segment, but we are finding that in our culture, these entertainers are more and more influential, whether it be politics or lifestyle. They have infiltrated where once community, parent stood
Not
as
enough or doing enough.
Look,
Yeah, but
I think
you can't argue against 500,000 units being sold. I think that that first week or so.
they could've-
million.
Look,
500.
No, he had 1 million. He had already
Million?
pre-sold
Yeah.
through Samsung.
Yeah.
So
Look, I think they could have had lunch or breakfast, just like Jay-Z sat down with Warren Buffett and Steve Forbes for a photo op, several weeks ago. I think that Belafonte and Jay-Z could have sat down, talked it over, and not be part of Jay-Z's latest, CD release. Because now all it looks like is just publicity, a publicity stunt,
Now,
and a
we
cheap
have,
shot.
We have about 1 minute, and I want to take it here. The Lions head coach was ranked 21st of head coaches.
Oh, my
I mean,
Lions,
so,
my
oh,
Lions.
the poor Lions. I'm going to get someone on. I'm going to have someone come to Table Talk from the Lions to talk about this season.
Yeah, and I think the bottom line is probably this:
Thanks,
is
Tom.
if he doesn't correct this ship, I think this probably will be his last year. And what the argument is he didn't build enough on defense, on the defensive segment of the game. So they ranked him down to, I think he was just above 2 of the new coaches. 2 or 3 of the new
stop hanging
coaches
out
are part of the NFL. So he's pretty much dead last when it comes in the NFL. But if he doesn't correct his ship,
he's out of here.
and they said he already having some dissension with Mayhew, the general manager.
The guys got. I mean, the team's got talent on paper, to be sure. I mean, they should have been a better team last year. The other thing that strikes me is, there's some real discipline problems. There's a cultural problem on this team. I mean, they're on ESPN for getting pulled over more than they are for exploits on the field.
Right.
I think that there continues to be a cultural problem with the Lions and how to be winners. You get good guys on the roster, but you still talent. Yeah, but how do you get that talent and notch it up?
You just got to go get some leaders.
Yeah.
You got to go. Who's the leader on the team?
I couldn't
Well,
tell those.
you have to have people that they respect.
Yeah.
Everybody, the time goes by so quickly. I'd like to thank Robert, Chris, and of course,
Ken Combs.
Ed.
On this day.
I know.
His next book is going to be on the day bankruptcy happened.
Yeah. Right. And we went on Table Talk to talk about it. Yeah.
But thank you very much. I'd like to thank Michelle Watson and Mr. Henry Tyler, and thank you all for joining us. And See you again next week. The woman will be here for
Right.
table talk. Table talk. See you next week.